NeonicVoid Productions presents.
And on that note, coffee bean filling. Hi, welcome to Book Watchers. I'm about to say a D&D podcast. Wrong podcast. Wrong show. I do this all the time. Hi, I am your host and problem, Devan. And today I'm joined by the tall bitch giant himself, Jacob. Hi, Jacob.
Hi, how are you?
You know, short, laying low to the ground, as you do when you're 5'6".
Yeah, it's not very hard for you.
You know, you agree to that way too easily, and that's a crime. That's a hate crime against short people.
Well, it's the
Oh,
truth.
you don't gotta say it out loud though. So remember, I got easy access to your kneecaps. Anyway, if you like this podcast, please go down to the description below and follow the link to finding this podcast as well as the others of the NeonicVoid family. I almost had blank. There'll also be the YouTube link in the description below if you want to go follow us on YouTube. Hi, how are you? What's good? What's popping? All the podcast stuff will be on the YouTube channel as well. There is no Twitter for this place yet. I'll get to that one day. Yeah. So today's episode. Well, today we're finally doing it.
Yep. After what, 2 months of us originally planning on reading this.
You know
book.
what? You know what? You're gonna drag me. Drag me.
Yes, I'm gonna drag you because you know what?
What?
In 2 months, I've read over 12 books. 12 books!
Uh-huh.
And it took you that long, if not longer, just to read one.
Yeah, it did.
Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. It took him so long to read this book that we pushed this book back and chose to do another book series. And what was the book we reviewed before this one? Was it Brother's Song, or was there another book that we decided to go over?
I think it was Brother's Song.
Was it? Because it felt like we did that a while ago.
We skipped like a week or two.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think it was Brother's Song that. I think.
Yeah. So we did all these other books, and I fell down a rabbit hole of reading a bunch of other book series by the same author, T.J. Klune. That includes Bear, Otter, and the Kid. And then
it was Brother's Song. Yeah.
Yep. And
that was the last one we did.
I read all those books, and then even before I started, before I started the Wolf Song series, I had actually read another book called Stormfront from the book from the Dresden Files, and now we're finally doing Fairytale, even though we originally planned to do this months ago. But Devan was like, I want to be included. I want to read a book and review it. And I'm like, okay, cool. Okay. Cool. 2 months later.
You know what? Okay. I'm going to plead my case, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, I am not much of a reader of the physical media of novels. I'm more of a graphic novel and comic book reader, mostly because I suffer from hardcore dyslexia. And if you don't know what that is, ladies and gentlemen, that is basically means you don't read so good. meaning your mind doesn't comprehend things the same way as everybody else. It means when you look at a book and see the words move around. And when the words move around, you kind of just don't want to read. And it takes you 3 times as long as a normal person to read. Granted, I know people who have dyslexia, obviously, who can read books like a normal person. But me, I'm a different fucking case. I actually wanted to do this podcast because I wanted to get myself into books to get better at. I mean, I could read. I'm not stupid, y'all. But dyslexia makes it's a hurdle. Okay. It's a big wall I gotta cross. But I wanted to do that. So I'm like, I'm gonna seriously read Fairytale. Because I mean, I did read a few other books, like the Ring series or one of the books in the Ring series, and which I'm sure we'll go over on this podcast at some point. And then maybe a few others, but like this is one I'm like, I'm gonna do this by myself. I usually like to read books with my boyfriend, and he reads to me, and I understand it better because that's how my mind works. But this, I'm like, I can do this, and then I got frustrated, and I'm like, no, I can't do this, and I'm like, no, I can't do this, and it's just a lot of back and forth, and eventually, I'm like, you know what, fuck it, for this one, audiobook. So I got audiobook and read along with the audiobook. So that's not cheating, that's still reading. I just had an assistant read to me and made my life a little easier. Okay. I will get better as we go along because I'm going to do more books on here. Luckily, those books that I want to do are not as long as this one. I think I bit off more than I could chew, but I'm glad I stuck with it because this book is actually pretty good. Oh, I played my case. Thank you, Your Honor.
And I thought maybe I would have encouraged him to read more by spoiling the book just a little bit for him, not giving him complete spoilers, but telling him like, oh yeah, you're definitely gonna love this book because guess what? There's an Eldritch Terror.
And he was correct. There is. Yep. Love him. Love him.
So I honestly, I don't even need to roast. I don't even need to roast Devan because I've been roasting him for the past couple months that I've been waiting for him to finish this book. So I think I've gotten the point across, and I'm just so ready. Let's go. This has been 2 months in the waiting.
Yeah. So, ladies and gents and others, the book we are going to be talking about today is Fairytale by Stephen King. This book was released. Yay! Clap score. This book was released September 6, 2022, which is weird because I thought for whatever reason it came out this year, but it didn't. So, actually, no, we knew about Fairytale last year because I was like, oh, I want to do this one eventually. We never got around to it till recently. So
yeah, well, because I hadn't bought the book yet.
Yeah, and we had a list of other stuff we wanted to do, and yeah,
and then I finally bought the book, but it still took me a few months to actually get around to reading it because I had other books I wanted to read.
Yeah,
and then there was a point where I was just so overwhelmed that I stopped reading for a bit because that's what happens. Like I'll find a book that I want to read, and like I'll go months and months of just reading all these different books, and then I get to a point where I fizzle out, and I'm like, all right, I'm done reading. Like I'm gonna just go enjoy life now.
Yeah.
And now here we are, and I finally read the book, and I'm like, oh, I'm so ready to review this book because I like this. This book is like probably one of my favorite Stephen King books because it's interesting. It's interesting because it's like, what if fairy tales were real, but not just real, but realistic in terms of the story, and not just magic wise, but like other, like so many other different aspects. Because in most fairy tales, it's always you know like our main character slash hero. He discovers he or she discovers fairy tale lands, and there's like some sort of evil like king, witch, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And like power of love or like some other like power of friendship bullshit allows them to defeat the evil king slash queen slash sorcerer, whatever's like holding the land hostage. and like let's say there was a curse on the land or something, and once they break the curse, everything goes back to normal and everyone
Yep.
lives happily ever after.
Bum,
And
bum,
while
bum.
like Stephen King definitely took notes from from like your standard fairy tale, like it didn't things weren't peachy weren't all peachy king at the end of the story. It didn't all go back to normal, and not everybody lived happily ever after. It was actually more realistic. Like, okay, well, curse has been broken. The plight of the land has been ended, but we're still dealing with the repercussions.
Yeah.
Everything isn't going to go back exactly it's not going to go back to exactly what it was before.
Yeah. So again, this book was done by Stephen King. It is a dark fantasy book, so it's not the usual horror mystery thrillers that Stephen King usually writes. I would say this is more in the vein of the Dark Tower, more of the fantasy aspect of that, just more of the fairy tale sprinkles than the darker toned um, Dark Tower types. Yeah. So this is centered around a story around Charlie Reed, a 17-year-old who I don't want to spoil it. So let's get right into it.
Yes,
So,
sir. So a little backstory about Charlie
yeah.
himself is so Charlie is the son of a single dad. His dad uh his mom passed away quite brutally. She was struck by a truck while crossing a very narrow bridge. It was like, although they don't really go much into details, it's implied that she became pure physics at the end of it. So she died
Oh,
instantly.
but they do describe her death, though, later on. What happened?
Yeah, yeah, they do. Like they
It's
do at
brutal.
first. Yeah, it was brutal and it was traumatic. Like for a solid minute, his dad had become an alcoholic. Like
Yeah.
I think what for like a year after her, like it was either like a year or a couple years after her death, his dad like like he went downhill, and it's understandable. You know, your wife dies in a brutal accident, and he had a hard time coping, and unfortunately for Charlie, he basically had to raise himself for a few years while his dad uh,
Yeah.
continued to descend into alcoholism. Eventually his dad came to a sense, like Charlie helped his dad come to his senses. His dad started going to AA, and by the time the story happens, I think uh I believe his dad had been sober for like I'd say about 4 or 5 years. So it's been a minute.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. At least, I think it's at least, I'm pretty sure it's at least 5 years he was sober by the time the
Yeah,
story starts and ends. Or 5 years. Yeah. So,
yeah. And Charlie, he himself, although he and his dad have a better relationship now, he still holds some resentments for his dad because, like, he still remembers how the times that they struggled, how Charlie basically had to be the adult, had to make sure the bills were paid, and um, and when his dad finally pulled himself out of it, went to AA and just started like turning his life around. Charlie just had like still holds on to some of those resentments. Like he loves his dad, but he just does he doesn't forget the fact that he was basically raising himself for a few years there. But
yeah.
aside from that, Charlie is he's a he's your I don't want to say he's your all American boy, but he's your typical like he's an athlete. He played football, and I understand. I remember his coach really wanted him to play varsity for the baseball team, but he really hated the coach, so he was like, "Nah, fuck that." Um, but the story is centered around Charlie, and it really begins when he meets an elderly man. What was the elderly man's name again? I totally forgot.
Mr. Howard Bowditch? Bowditch?
Bowditch.
Bowditch.
Howard Bowditch. Yes.
He met Howard Bowditch on a day in April 2013. Basically he was on a ladder trying to work on something on the back of this house, and he fell, broke his leg, or so you thought, broke his leg. And what lured him to finding Bowditch was his dog Radar howling. And it got Charlie's attention, and then from there Charlie called 911, got him all taken care of. And that's where Charlie gets brought into knowing and basically taking care of Mr. Bowditch, or Howard, for quite some time.
Yeah. So when Charlie realized that Mr. Bowditch didn't have anybody to take care of Radar, he agreed to take care of Radar for Mr. Bowditch while he recovered in the hospital. So he was in the hospital, I'd say, for like a couple weeks or so.
Actually, I think he was in there for almost a month. Almost.
Oh God.
I think he was in there for like 3 weeks, something like that.
Yeah. So Charlie visits him in the hospital, gets the rundown of what the recovery time is going to look like and what Mr. Bowditch needs, and he agrees to take care of Radar. Now, Radar herself is an elderly German Shepherd dog. She's almost like 14, 15 years old, so she's she's an old girl.
She's an old girl. Yeah.
But let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. She's a lot older than we think she is, and we'll get. We will get.
She's
yeah,
not,
she is.
I mean, technically, she's not.
She is.
No, she's not. Okay, I'm gonna cut this part out. She didn't use the sundial when he went into the thing, because he never stated when he actually got her. He just stated when he was in the fantasy world they had her as a puppy. He never stated how long he actually had her.
He actually got her in the 90s, which was around the last time he used it. So he did use it on her at least like once. So Radar's been around for a long time. Because
I don't remember that.
The book takes place in the time of the story takes place in like 2019, I'd say, around there. And Mr. Bowditch stopped using he stopped going down the staircase and using the sundial in the 90s, and he had
Now, it wasn't 2019 that this story takes place. It's 2013 that this story takes place, or 2014 when he finally, he found Mr. Bowditch in his backyard in April of 2013, and then he was taking care of him for 7 months. During that 7-month time frame, that's where he was in the hospital, and then he cared for him in his house. Yeah, that was 2013 into 2014, basically. Because those 7 months that he was taking care of him before something happens. Air quotes.
Right. Hold on. No, because I know he's had her for a long, long time. Like he's had her like well before he stopped.
It makes sense because he was talking about last time he went, Radar was a puppy. So I guess, because I don't think he ever directly says how old she is, or because I think all they said was she was a puppy. So you could assume that she's old as hell. Because if it was the 90s or even the 80s, she'd be old as hell. So I guess thinking back on he would have to use at least once. But he never straight out said that he did. You just assume because they do say that last time he went, she was a puppy. Last time she went there.
Well, she was older than that, because thing is, she was old enough. Like he'd been bringing her down into the Fairytale land like many times, even after she was a puppy, because she even remembered that shoemaker.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Is when he talks about the shoemaker, she indicates that the last time she saw her, she was a little puppy. Never indicating that she was older or whatnot. Because she does like a hand motion that she was much smaller when she met Radar.
Right. Or she could have been
Because
much younger.
how long does German Shepherds live? German
Uh,
Shepherds.
anywhere between 12 and 15 years. Big dogs don't really live for as well. I don't know. It's always weird because it's either small dogs live for a long time and big dogs don't, or big dogs live for a long time and small dogs don't.
German Shepherd's lifespans 9 to 13 years. Say he went back in the 90s because it's been at least 90s. That was the last time he ever went. She was a pup. Say she was a puppy then.
Okay.
He's 23. So yeah, he probably used it probably once, but they never straight up. I don't think they ever straight up indicate it. I don't remember. I could be wrong, but I think you can insinuate that they did.
Okay. Well, let's just get back on topic. So yeah, so Charlie ends up taking care of Radar for a little over a month while Mr. Bowditch recovers in the hospital. And he eventually does come back, and at this point, however, he needs to be in assisted living because given his advanced age, Mr. Bowditch is no longer capable of really taking care of himself, even with his recovery and the physical therapy. So Charlie decides to take on the role of being his caretaker. Now, the thing is, Charlie was, excuse me, Charlie was, he feels like he needs to do this, basically become a caretaker for Mr. Bowditch because when his dad was an alcoholic, he just remembers making like he calls it his deal with God. He prayed to God, prayed to whoever was out there to please like turn Dad's life around, so we can start living again instead of just surviving. Help like get him out of his alcoholism, all that shit, right? And well, when it happened, since then Charlie has been doing everything he could to like basically honor that, like if you do this I will be the best person I can be, right? And he sees helping Mr. Bowditch as his way of giving back to what was given to him, which was his dad, his and some semblance of their old life,
Yep.
like so he ends up working with Mr. Bowditch. Let's see. I'm gonna pull up my notes because I have notes. Looks after Mr. Bowditch himself when he turns home during that period.
Basically, like
So,
when he got back to the house, Charlie, of course, fortified the house to be able to have Mr. Bowditch live in the bottom floor of the house with the multiple floors. That's when Charlie also learns about the gold that Howard has mysteriously for some fucking reason. Why gold? You'll find
yes,
out.
yeah. So it's a whole bucket of these like little gold pellets, and Mr. Bowditch would um he would trade it to like a jeweler in one of the neighboring towns. And that's pretty much how that's pretty much where his like all of his income comes from.
Yep.
And over this period of uh providing for Mr. Bowditch, he Charlie begins noticing some weird, like some things that are off about Mr. Bowditch. Like, even though he has a very old TV, he just seems very out of touch with the modern world. And even some things like, yeah, he's met old people before, but they seem to have a general idea of how things are nowadays. But Mr. Bowditch seems to be like way out of touch.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was the dealings with the jeweler that Mr. Bowditch had Charlie do for him. Since it was pretty much getting around the time that Mr. Bowditch needed to cash in some more of the gold for money, he has Charlie do it for him, and it was kind of Charlie thought, man, this is sus because like it's very like under the table. He goes to the jeweler to trade the gold for some cash, and
To pay
he's
the
like,
his hospital bills as well as other expenses he needed. But the jeweler is very much like, you have more gold? I never seen this much. Do you have more? Where'd you get it from, kid? Where'd you get it from?
come on, man, you can trust me. Tell me where you got it. And Charlie's like, no, this is sus. Just give me the money and I'll get head on my way. But then, like, not too long after that dealing, he finds out that that said jeweler was murdered in his store, and the
Yep.
killer is still on the loose. So, like, oopsie. Well, I wouldn't say oopsie, but oh well. And it just seems like there's just a little things about Mr. Bowditch and how he lives that are like really off-putting to Charlie, and it's confusing for him. But he just rolls with it for the time being. Eventually, Mr. Bowditch's health does somewhat improve. He's able to move around the house a lot more easily.
Yep.
Until a commotion comes from this large shed in Bowditch's backyard.
Now,
Uh,
this shed has been an issue since the beginning because it's been doing some creepy noises and scratching. That's happened a few times. Charlie's taking care of Radar as well as the house when Mr. Bowditch is away. So that shed, by the point this happens, Charlie already has like a what the fuck is in that goddamn shed?
right. And it was in this. It was like pretty much at the like let's say about like 4 or 5 months after Bowditch came home. Uh, Something began to really scratch and like rustle around inside the shed, and Bowditch, he freaks out. He tells Charlie to take Radar inside, and um, Bowditch, he comes out of the house. He had grabbed his really old model revolver,
Yeah.
and he had this leather belt strapped on, and he goes into the shed. Uh, Charlie hears a commotion inside the shed and hears a gunshot. And when Mr. Bowditch comes out, Mr. Bowditch is looking very worn out. He looks sickly, and like I think like the excitement was too much for him. And a few days later, Mr. Bowditch unfortunately passes away from a heart attack. But before he dies, Bowditch had recorded and left uh, a tape for Charlie to listen to.
Now hold
Before
up, hold
Charlie,
up, hold up. It kind of skipped around a little bit to review because the recording kind of skipped up a little bit. It skipped over a certain part. So Mr. Bowditch just dies of a heart attack a few days later after dealing with that insectoid that they see in the shed.
hold up, yeah. So when he dies, he not only leaves Charlie a tape explaining everything, um, all the weird occurrences that have happened with the shed, but also about Howard's life itself. Uh, Charlie is also shocked to find out that Mr. Bowditch left a will and pretty much willed everything to Charlie.
Uh-huh.
The dog, the house, everything in it, and everything in and the property itself. And since Charlie's underage, it had to be put in a trust until he turns 18. Um, but he ends up listening. So when he inherits the house, he ends up listening to the tape Mr. Bowditch left for him, and in the tape, Bowditch recounts to Charlie a very wild tale. Excuse me, revealing that
He's old as fuck.
he's actually 120 years old,
Yeah.
and locked inside the shed is actually a portal to another world. And so this portal, it takes the form of it looks kind of like a well, but inside the well is a spiral staircase. And if you go right down into the well now, and the recording, he has more details about like how many steps, what you need to do when you go down the well, everything. But once you go down the well, it takes you to another world. And in this world exists a magical kingdom, and inside the kingdom's capital is a sundial. And this
Yep.
sundial is was the secret to Mr. Bowditch's uh, longevity. He reveals that world is also the source of the gold that he had been using to supplement his income, but as a source of his income. But thing is that this gold is there's something about this gold that causes like extreme amounts of greed, because when Charlie realizes that the gold is there, he kind of has this habit of looking at it and often like running the gold through his fingers, because they're just like little gold pellets, so he'll just like be like playing around with the gold and everything. So it definitely has an odd effect on people. um After Mr. Bowditch's death and Charlie inherits the house experiences a break-in. There's nothing was stolen as far as he could tell, but uh, it did freak him out, and him and his father end up fixing up the house and getting everything in order to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Now, just after Charlie learns of Mr. Bowditch's longevity, he decides that he wants to see it for himself. So Charlie decides to take a trip down into the well. Now he doesn't. Does he take? Yeah, he takes Radar with him, right? The first time, or does
Oh,
he go by himself?
when he goes down the well.
Yeah, the first time,
I
because he
don't
goes down to.
think. I'm trying to remember if he did go, because I think he did go down the well the first time, but I don't know if he brought Radar with him, because I remember him talking about when he first brought Radar, he was worried that Radar was going to slip and fall, but she didn't. So I don't know. I don't think he brought her down the first time, because I think he went down there to see what the hell's up, and then he's like, "Oh shit!" And then he went back. I think he went back up like right away, and then planned his journey accordingly.
Right. So real
Yeah.
quick, I kind of want to backtrack, because when Charlie was listening to the tape,
Uh-huh.
there was about halfway through the tape, Mr. Bowditch tells him to pause right here and uh, go into the shed and see for himself what he was dealing with, because
Uh-huh.
and this is in reference to the thing that had caused the commotion inside the shed and that Mr. Bowditch shot.
Yeah.
Uh, so Charlie goes into the shed. He sees the well, but he also sees this massive cockroach.
Blech.
I know. I was like, "Oh no, 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 no! Please tell me we're not going to be dealing with giant cockroaches for the rest of the book." But it was a giant cockroach, and he notices that the cockroach had already looked like it had been decaying for months, even though the incident concerning the cockroach happened a few days before. And he goes back, he listens to the rest of the tape, and Mr. Bowditch reveals that our world is toxic to anything that comes from that world. So, like, the atmosphere is, I guess, our atmosphere is corrosive to them, or just causes rapid degeneration. So, anything that comes from the well will die in a matter of hours, if not in a matter of days. And eventually, its body will just decay and just disappear. So that's what Charlie saw in the shed. He listens to the rest of the tape, and then going forward, we have a few other incidents. He decides to take a quick trip down into the well to see what he's dealing with. He follows Mr. Bowditch's instructions, uh, and going down into the well, he was told make sure not to like bring a lot. I think he did have to like at one point turn off his like any kind of like if he brings a flashlight, he has to turn it off.
Yeah.
Um, because at one point there, because once he gets to the bottom of the staircase, he's gonna come out into a massive cavern, and in this cavern, he'll not only find the cockroaches, but also an entire nest of bats, big ones too. We're talking,
Giant
we're not
bats.
talking, yeah, we're not talking like the size of like the flying fox type bats. We're talking something bigger.
Yeah.
And so he knew, like, at a certain point he has to turn off his light and just be quiet as possible to not disturb the bats. But he gets to the entrance of the cavern, and it's covered by a bunch of vines. So once he pushes through the vines, he's met with an entire field of these red poppies, these red poppy flowers, exactly like Mr. Bowdish explained, described in the book, in his recording. And he sees off in the distance a little house. He doesn't go into the house. He doesn't go down to the house. He just wait. Does he? I feel like he does. Yeah, he does.
He
He goes
meets Dora
down.
already?
Yeah, he did meet Dora because he meets Dora first,
Oh, that's right.
and
He did. He did.
yeah. Okay, okay. So he decides to take a little stroll through the poppy field, and he remembered what Mr. Bowditch said in the recording, that there's a little house, and the person living there, Miss Dora, is very kind. She'll give you. Uh, she's a very kind person. Just don't be. Well, I don't even think he. I don't think Mr. Bowditch knew of like the sickness that had been affecting the fairy the this other world. But when Charlie sees the this woman, her name is Dora. He's shocked to see that she's actually she's very deformed. Like her skin is a has turned completely gray. She has these lumps, and like her skin, her face, her whole body is just lumpy and misformed. And because of that, it's preventing her from actually talking. So even though she's able to like live, pretty much go about her day like normal, it's it type he learns that he'll soon learn that this world is affected by some sort of blight or curse that causes its natives to turn to begin to decay and turn. It's called, I think it's called like what, the Great Death or something. I don't
Um,
even think.
or just the gray.
Yeah,
The
it's just
gray. Yeah.
yeah. So the sickness is commonly referred to as the gray, causes people, just the common people, to turn, like, their skin to turn gray, their body begins to become malformed, and they slowly lose their ability to speak and function coherently until they die,
Yeah.
until they eventually die. It doesn't affect The gray doesn't affect Charlie, and as we'll learn later on in the book, it doesn't affect members of the royal family. So people of a certain bloodline are unaffected by the gray. And after Charlie speaks to Dora for a bit, and she gives him some food, he goes back up the well. But when he comes back out of the shed, uh, he is accosted by a man with a gun. So
Motherfucker.
this dude, uh, this was the same guy that broke into Mr. Bowditch's house a few days before,
Yeah.
and although it was never confirmed, it was also implied that he was the man who murdered the jeweler. And the reason why he has the reason why he has targeted Charlie is because he figured out that Charlie is in possession of the gold that was sold at the jewelers.
Yeah.
So he threatens Charlie with a gun and tries to and tells Charlie to show him where the gold is. Charlie acquiesces and leads him up to where the vault is, but he manages to distract his would-be gunman, his would-be murderer, and manages to disarm him, getting the gun from his attacker. And he leads the guy back out towards the shed, and he tells the guy basically to fuck off, but not before he not before Charlie breaks this man's wrists and sends him on his unhappy way.
Yup.
And later on, uh, Charlie, like, he does feel a little bit of regret for just basically he does feel a little regret for basically just breaking this dude's wrists and sending him out on his way without like alerting the authorities and without like making sure the guy gets medical help, because later on he learns that the guy was found dead. So Charlie does feel a little bit of guilt because since like he broke the dude's wrists, I guess the guy wasn't able to fend for himself and he ends up dying. I think it was because that guy ended up getting mugged by someone else and they ended up killing him. And since his
Yeah.
wrists were broken,
And he didn't have
uh,
his gun.
yeah, because Charlie did take the man's gun too, and so he did feel like a little bit of regret for that, but at the same time he was like, no, fuck that guy, he would have killed me.
Yeah.
And beyond that, Charlie begins making his plans to take a trip through the Fairytale world because one thing that Charlie just does not want to lose is Radar. So Radar, like we've established earlier, is a very old dog. She's like about 14, 15 years old at this point. She's at the end of her life, and well, Charlie, he became really attached to this dog, and he really didn't want to let her go just yet. And since he learned from Mr. Bowditch that there is a magical sundial in the other world that can basically reverse time around a person and make them younger, Charlie thought, well, why not? So he ends up making plans to go down into the well. He takes Radar and some supplies down into the well and decides to make a journey to the sundial. So he makes his plans. He waits for his dad to be out of town because his dad goes on a week-long trip, and he wants to try to make it there to the sundial and back before his dad gets back. He packs up. Uh, he makes sure to packs up Radar. He brings a. I think he either brings one or he tries to bring like a wagon down there for her. Or I think Dora ends up giving him a wagon, right?
Yeah, I think Dora gives him a wagon.
Yeah. So he just makes sure to bring everything he can to accommodate Radar, especially since she needs medicine to help with her arthritis and everything. And he makes his journey. He makes sure to lock up the house and everything else before he makes his way down into the well. He stays the night with Dora. Radar was extremely excited to see Dora. Like, this is the first time that Charlie sees Radar acts pretty much like a younger dog. She gets very excited when she sees Dora. Dora makes sure to help accommodate him and gives him some extra supplies. She also makes her requests of him because the only way now, just really quick, the only way that Dora can actually talk to him is by writing. So she will write. Uh, she'll just basically write on a notepad for him, telling him what she wants to say to him, and she also gives him a wagon for Radar because since poor Radar, she's too old to really make such a long distance journey. She Charlie ends up uh, carrying Radar along in the little wagon. Uh, Dora makes a request of Charlie. She gives him a little, like, it's like a token
Yeah.
for him to give to any travelers he finds. Because the thing is, Dora and her brother, they have this deal where they any travelers in need of new shoes, they just give their old shoes to Dora's brother, who will repair them, and then Dora will make sure to provide them with uh, a new pair of shoes. And Yeah, it's really sweet. They do everything they can. It's really sweet that they do everything they can to help people that are traveling, especially because they see a lot of travelers coming from the direction of the Emerald City. Oh wait, hold up. What was the name of the actual city?
The city was named
Empis.
Empis. Empis was the
The world. It's the world.
the world.
Yes.
City is
So
called. Is it
no,
called
no, no.
Empis?
No. Okay. So the world. So the magic. So this other world is actually called Empis, and the city itself is called Lillimar.
Limar. Lilimar, yeah.
So thing is, Charlie slowly learns that long time ago, around the time, which was like around the time that Mr. Bowditch made his last journey into Olympus, uh, there was basically a collapse of society, and after this collapse, that was when the gray began to affect the land, and it all started in the city in the capital city of Lillimar. And so people have been for like decades now have been fleeing the surrounding area of Lillimar and trying to escape the gray. So as more people continue to travel past Dora's home, she tries to provide them with anything they need, especially fresh pairs of shoes, because this is a fantasy setting. This is a world set in like times like kind of like a medieval time, or I don't know. I would say this is more like a Renaissanceian style uh, setting.
Agreed. Agreed.
It's not medieval, but it's like definitely more Renaissanceian. And uh, so of course like they can't just go into a famous footwear and buy new shoes. So she tries to make sure that all the travelers have any travelers that come by have a fresh pair of shoes. Which is it's kind of cute. I think it's sweet.
Yeah, and her
So
brothers are one that repair, or her cousins the one that repairs them.
yep. So she sends Charlie on his way, but she tells Charlie to first head to like basically she tells him of several places that he can stop for the night. Because it's not safe to travel at night, especially because there are wolves.
Yep.
They only come out at night. These wolves, there's something off about these wolves. I don't think we actually see them.
No, I don't think they actually ever give a description of them, but they just say that there's something. You kind of get the feeling that something off about them.
Yes, so she tells him to base first stop is for the I think she was called the Goose Lady or something.
Yes, the Goose Lady.
Yep. So, uh, just to kind of like condense the next several parts, because this next part from traveling from Dora's house to uh, the city of Lolamar, it's pretty long because it takes him several days to finally get to Lolamar. But when he does, along the way, he makes stops and takes shelter with members of the former royal house of the Galleon.
Yeah.
So uh, these Galleon family members, they are all living in exile. They once ruled the city of Lillimar, but when the collapse happened, they were forced into exile, and each of them bears a very peculiar curse. So it's the same curse, but the curse affects them in different ways. It robs them of one of their five senses, or like something like that.
Yeah, it's something of their senses. Hearing, sight, smell. Well, no
And
one has smell. Thank God. That'd be weird.
so
You know,
yeah, we only encounter well, four technically, but the fourth one we'll get to later. But the three members that we do encounter who are who are the good guys would be a girl named Leah. So Leah, she is the way the curse affected her is that it basically took away her ability to speak. But the problem is that it didn't just like strip her of her voice like Little Mermaid style. It took away her mouth.
Yeah.
So where her mouth should be, is just like a blank space. There's like a little like spot to I think on the look like basically where the like on the either on the left or right side of her face, where the corner of her lips would be, and she has to basically pierce that little spot to open a hole up in her mouth, so that way
Eh,
she can, yeah, so she can be able to like get food and sustenance, but she has to drink liquefied uh mulched like liquefied food because she doesn't have a mouth. The way she talks is by projecting her voice through a horse, of all things.
right.
And so basically she puppets or like ventriloquists her way through speaking, but it's very difficult for her, so she doesn't do it very often. She tells Charlie a little bit about the of what exactly happened to Emphas, but she doesn't go into too much detail. Eventually, she sends him on his way and tells him to make his next stop at her uncle's house, a man named Stephen Woody Woodley.
Woody.
Now, Woody, he is like her as a member of the royal family, and the curse that affects him completely took away his sight. So where his eyes should be are just empty sockets. And he tells Charlie more about the history of Memphis, but he confirms that the let me see here. He learns that Memphis was taken over by basically an usurper who calls himself the Flight Killer, and there and the Flight Killer is the reason why the Gray has come and why the royal family have been forced out of the city of Lillimar. He's it's hinted that he is the big bad, but at the same time, there's also mentions of something else. They hint that there's something beneath the city of Lillimar that has been slumbering, and they fear that Flight Killer's role may cause it to wake up. And I'm like, when they hinted at this, uh, I'm like, oh, so we're dealing with like a sleeping giant or like some sort of demon? Okay, okay.
A
Don't know what it is.
terror, even?
Yeah, I didn't really like think it would be a terror at first. Oh my god, I'm sorry, I gotta go like sorry, hang on. Do I have any? No, I don't. Damn it. My allergies are starting to act up, and I'm like, no. And I ran out of allergy pills. The brand that I use is like really expensive, but whatever. I'm just sniffling right now. Anyway, so like I was saying, at first I didn't realize it was like an eldritch, like some sort of terror, like eldritch terror, but it hints that Flight Killer is actually serving some other dark force, like some sort of dark entity. And
Yup.
throughout the book, Charlie like remembers stories that his mom told him about like some ancient evil called Gog Magog.
Gog Magog. I love Gog Magog.
Uh-huh. It isn't until Charlie comes to like he leaves Woody's house the next day, and he finally makes it to, well, he doesn't really make it to the city. The thing about Lillimar is that, and the surrounding town and the town surrounding it, it's huge. Like Lillimar is massive. It's a massive city, and even like in the area surrounding it, there's like miles and miles of land stretching between Lillimar and uh, the last house that Charlie makes a stop at, and that is the house of, I believe she's like a cousin, like a distant cousin of Leia's. Her name is Claudia.
Yes, Claudia.
So Claudia, um, way the curse affects her is that it took away her hearing, and the way it did that was by like where her ears should be, there's just nothing. Gone. So she has no ears, she's completely deaf, and whenever she talks, she yells. So it's always like she's always yelling. And it's kind of hilarious. I think Charlie has to either like write what he wants to tell her down just so she knows what he's talking about. Uh and she the other like Leia and Woody provide him with food and supplies. She provides him with a little bit of extra stuff so that way he can make his journey into the city and back without any issues. She even goes so far as to provide Charlie with a motorized tricycle, and which was confusing to Charlie because when he got into Empus, all of his electronic devices, like his phone, and I think well, I don't think he brought a flashlight, but his phone immediately died, and she said that uh, that Bowditch had brought the motor down into Empus, but he had charged it from there. So I guess like in order for machinery to like electronics to work, it has to be like built in Memphis itself. So basically he had a he she gives him an electric a motorized trike, and it has a nice big basket in it for radar to ride in. I should also really quick just take a quick step back because along the way on his travels he does encounter this little man. I don't know exactly what he is. I think he was either a leprechaun or something, or some little gremlin. I don't know. He Charlie gets on this dude's shit list because the guy was torturing a big ass cricket,
Yep.
and Charlie didn't like that. I mean, yeah, it was a big ass cricket, like huge, but he at the same time he was like Charlie was like, man, you either kill the damn thing or you don't. It's he had this really strong sense that what this guy was doing to the cricket was wrong, so he tells the guy to fuck off and threatens him. But this guy tells him like, oh, you've made a big mistake here. And the reason why I mention this guy is because this guy will cause problems for Charlie later on down the line. But we'll get to that later. Charlie, now equipped with the motor trike and some extra supplies from Claudia, makes his way to the gates of Lillimar. He had been given instructions by, I think it was either Woody or Claudia, that once he gets to the gate, he must uh, shout to the gate, call out to the gate, open in the name of Leia of the Galleon, because Leia is the heir to the throne, and I guess her name carries power. But they tell him that from Claudia's house, don't go directly into the city because by the time he reaches the gate from Claudia's house, it'll already be the day will be over. Even with the tricycle, it takes him an entire day just to reach the gate, and uh, so they tell him take shelter in this tram station, like tram house, just outside the gate, and wait for morning to go into the city and then come back out. He was given detailed instructions of how to navigate the city. Uh, so, come the next morning, he sets out early and he goes up to the gate, calls out, "Open in the name of Leia the Galleon," and the gate opens. And the thing is, leading up to the gate, when he first lays eyes on the city of Lillimar, he gets this sensation of wrongness. Like there's something off about the city. Like something is twisting it into some sort of weird, dark shadow of what the city was originally supposed to be. And it's when it gets to this part in the book when it's describing the sensation he's feeling concerning the city. I'm like, oh my god! This was the moment where I was like, oh my god, there's an eldritch terror in the city.
Yup, there sure is.
And yeah, we would later be proven right. Uh, there doesn't really. I don't think they really confirmed what the Eldritch Terror was like really called, but he does say Charlie later does say make the mistake of saying its name, Gog Magog, while he was in the city, and the entire city groans like something was shifting underneath it, or like the whole city itself shifted. So it heavily implies like that the name of the creature is called Gog Magog, and if you value your uh, if you want it to stay asleep, shut the fuck up and don't say its name. But yes, so he finally makes it into the city, and following the instructions given to him uh, by the royal family, he makes his way through the city. He also has some help from Mr. Bowditch because when Mr. Bowditch used to travel through the city, he had actually marked. He actually left marks throughout the city. So whenever Charlie would see the marks, he knew he was going in the right direction. And uh, and at one point, remembering the instructions from both Mr. Bowditch and the Galleon family, he comes across an actual giant. I believe her name was
Hannah.
Hannah. Yep. So Hannah was left by Flight Killer to guard the way to the sundial because sundial is seen as an important artifact, and he does manage to sneak his way past Hannah. He had to do it quietly without the engine of his tricycle on, and he does make it through. When he gets past Hannah, he comes across the garden where the sundial is, and inside the garden, there's also a fountain. And unfortunately, inside the fountain actually was home to a mermaid, good mermaid. And we're not talking about evil siren. We're talking about a good friendly mermaid. But unfortunately, the good friendly mermaid
Dead.
was deceased.
Yeah, part was sad the way they described that.
Yeah, even later when Charlie tells Leah and the other Galleon family members about this, they were heartbroken because the mermaid was good. Was good. It was an innocent creature. Um, but we later find out that it was actually killed by Hannah's half giant daughter.
Molly? I think that was her name, Molly?
Something like that. And
Red
yeah,
Molly.
so
Sorry.
yeah. So stealing his nerves, he goes to the sundial and he places radar on it, and remember, following the instructions from uh, Mr. Bowditch, he turns the dial. I think he has to turn it counterclockwise in order to reverse time, and
Yeah.
he has to remember not to let it turn too many times because then you may end up taking too much time off of a radar. So there could be a chance that he runs the risk of completely reverting radar back down to pre-existence. Oh my god, my allergies are really like acting up now. Like I'm all congested now. Shit. Sorry. Uh, so he turns. I think he ends up turning the dial like about nine, like somewhere between nine, like 14 times or something like that. Like it as he turns it, it begins to spin faster and faster, to the point where he pretty much loses control of it. And towards the end of it, he notices that radar is becoming more active. Like he can't see her properly because of how fast the dial begins to turn. But eventually, radar comes to her senses, and she ends up jumping off the dial on her own. And when she jumps off of it, she's a dog in her prime. She's no longer this elderly dog. She is young. She's sprightly and very, very active. So good for Charlie. He did what he came there to do. So he decides, all right, we've wasted enough time we've wasted a good amount of the day trying to get here. Let's get the fuck out of here before it gets too dark. Uh, so Charlie and Radar, they make their way back past Hannah's house and through the city. But he soon realizes that the marks that Mr. Bowditch had left behind were gone. So the marks that he used to make his way through the city to the sundial, they were long gone. He at first doesn't know why, but eventually he figures it out. So as he's trying to find his way through, he runs into that same little man that was torturing the cricket, and uh, apparently the dude was so pissed off. The dude was so petty that Charlie did that he followed Charlie into the city and began erasing all the marks that Mr. Bowditch left behind. So Uh, then he leaves Charlie there, and now Charlie is thoroughly lost in the city of Lillimar. Lillimar is like I said, is very big, and it's like a maze. Can easily get lost in the city. But Charlie figures out a way to get back to the front gate. I believe he climbs a statue, and he gets his bearings from the city, and manages to navigate his way through the city. And at one point, he ends up going through a cemetery, which a lot of people had told him don't go through the cemetery because
Yeah.
after everything was said and done, Flight Killer had disturbed the dead, and the dead are not happy. And they almost trap Charlie in the cemetery, but he manages to get out. Unfortunately, by the time he makes it to the gate, the sun has already set, and uh, excuse me, hold on. So when the sun, so Charlie had been warned that he needs to get out of the city before dark because the city is patrolled at night by the night soldiers, by an army of the undead called the Night Soldiers. And he doesn't, and they tell him don't get caught by the Night Soldiers because then that's it. And even though he's at the gate, the Night Soldiers know he's there. So as soon as the sun set, they immediately uh, pounce on him. Uh, they were they were all hiding in the royal palace at the center of the city, but they quickly make their way to the gate to catch Charlie. Uh, Charlie nearly escapes. He managed to get the gate open again, and Radar got through. But before Charlie could, he is caught by the leader of the Night Soldiers. Um, and he is taken into an underground prison called Deep Maline. It's there. I think he spends like the next several months being being forced to take part in a form of gladiatorial style tournament. Uh, so he spends like the next few months training for a bigger tournament called the Fair One. Now, the Fair One is just like a sort of like a it's just really a game to entertain Flight Killer and the other nobles that took his side. And while he's in prison, Charlie learns that Flight Killer was actually Leia's brother, Eldon. Now, Eldon was described to be as a excuse me. He's described as there it is. He's described as lame in the old sense, where the word lame is used to describe somebody with deformities or like some form of handicaps. So I think like he was described as someone who's very squat. He had a club foot, and he was not very attractive looking. But uh, Flight Killer or Eldon was, you could say he was mistreated by his family. The only person who seemed to treat him with respect was his sister Leia. But Flight Killer eventually got seduced by Gog Magog and cut a deal with him and ended up overthrowing the Gallian family and unleashing the Grey onto the people of Empis. And what was I going to look up? I'm sorry, I was going to look up something real quick. Oh, never mind. Uh, so he spends the next few months training for the Fair One, and while he's there, while he's in prison underneath the in Deep Meline, he begins to notice that his brown hair and eyes are beginning to change color. So now his hair is turning blonde and his brown eyes begin to turn blue. And his fellow inmates all see that as a sign that he is becoming uh, their true prince and savior, because there is a prophecy that a prince will come and save them from the Grey and end the reign of terror and end Flight Killer's reign of terror. Uh, Eventually, the Fair One begins. Charlie survives the first round, but before the second round can begin, he and his remaining roommates they escape with the help of a warder named Percy. So the warders were people that were kept alive, and they were used as servants. And one warder named Percy, he would bring out food for the inmates, and he began to plot with Charlie on a way of escaping. He shows them a way out of Deep Meline, and they manage to escape into the street. And they do escape the city, and where he is reunited with Radar, Dora, and the Gallian family. They tell Charlie of Eldon's past, as the two youngest siblings, Leia and Eldon, were very close. Eldon, like I've said, was badly bullied for his appearance and deformities. Um, at some point, he discovers another well. So we had the well that led from Earth into Empis. Well, there's a well inside of the royal palace that leads into uh, another world where uh, the evil creature Gog Magog is slumbering. Well, slumber is a strong word. The deep well leads into, and like I said, leads into another world where Gog Magog is currently trapped. Now they reveal to him that there is a prophecy where the deep well will finally be opened, but it'll only be opened when the two moons of Empis touch.
They
So Empis,
kiss.
yep, it's called. Let me see here. It was called. Well, either way, so it refers to a prophecy of when the two moons of Empis will eventually collide with each other. So, when Charlie experiences his first night on Empis, he immediately realizes that one, it has two moons, and two, these two moons like literally race across the sky. Like they go from one end of the sky to the other in a matter of seconds. So the thing is that I get this implies that the moons are not only orbiting very close to this, very close to the planet, to the world of Empis, but they are also going very fast around the planet. Now, the two moons have never touched each other. Oftentimes, they are like shown. They can be seen in different positions in the sky, but they do. They do fly across the sky very close to each other, and eventually the two moons will eventually collide. And it's during this collision that Gog Magog will be able to come. That the deep well will be opened, and Gog Magog can finally come into the world of Emphis. Now, Eldon had opened the deep well, which had opened the way to the deep well, I should say, and had led him to becoming Flight Killer, attaining power as Gog Magog's puppet, and cursing Emphis out of revenge for his mistreatment. So Charlie and the Galleon family plan to return to Lillimar and defeat Flight Killer before the moons collide, and allowing him to open the deep well once again. Leia is conflicted because she refused to believe that her brother Eldon had become Flight Killer, but Charlie ultimately convinces her to join them. Leia leads them through the city back into the royal palace during the day. She uh, she leads them through the royal palace, and surprisingly, this is where like kind of like where the magic of Empis is seen more and more of how weird it is and convoluted it is, because even though the well is technically beneath the royal palace, the path that she takes them actually leads them to the like very top of the towers of the royal palace, which is kind of weird. But eventually, they make it into the deep well, and they find Flight Killer, which waiting at its entrance, just as the two moons collide, allowing the well to open. Leia sees Flight Killer as he is and accept that he's become evil, and she stabs him with her dagger before he is dragged into the well by Gog Magog and killed. Gog Magog begins to emerge from the well, but Charlie, remember, he's reminded of the story of Rumpelstiltskin and
which
how
is
named.
also referenced a lot in the story.
Yeah, it's not just Rumpelstiltskin, but there are plenty of other fairy tales that
Yeah.
are referenced here.
But
This one,
Rumpelstiltskin is like the one that's referenced the most because he references that like several times with different characters for whatever reason.
yeah. And the importance of that is because the way in the story of Rumpelstiltskin, um, he was causing mischief, and he would have caused more mischief, and the only way to stop him was to correctly guess his name. And someone was able to guess his name because he made the mistake of saying it out loud when he thought he was alone, but somebody heard it. So when they told him his name, he was forced to stop. So it references how names have power. And when Charlie remembers the story of Rumpelstiltskin, he repeatedly declares its name, causing it to retreat back into the well in defeat. The well is then closed again and pretty much ends the curse upon Empis. The gray, the curse of the gray, is stopped, so it will no longer spread. Leah, Claudia, and Woody, they do begin to regain what they lost. For Leah, unfortunately, she actually gets her mouth back, not by defeating her brother and Gog Magog, but she takes a knife and she actually jabs it into her mouth, and she reopens it herself. Now,
Gross.
it was implied that she tried that once before, but her mouth had immediately closed. But since the Gog Magog and Flight Killer were defeated, her mouth will remain as it was, but now it's kind of gross because she has her mouth back, but it's all scarred and ugly looking. And this is where I like towards since it's coming to the end of the story. This is where I referenced how like this story was more realistic as a fairy tale because what if fairy tales were more realistic? So Charlie, um, they return to the surface, and Charlie announces their victory and proclaims Leia as their new queen. The thing is, Charlie had sustained some very severe injuries during their conflict uh, with Gog Magog. I think like what happened, he broke his arm, or like his arm got really fucked up by. Oh yeah. So future Devin, edit that last part, the speculation out just now. But so Flight Killer had several attendants and nobles who sided with him, and one of them was this really nasty chick. I don't even remember her name, and she's not important, but she had filed her teeth down to like basically needle points. Gross.
It
And
was
she
it was Flight Killer's
mistress.
mistress partner. Yeah.
Yeah, she bit the shit out of Charlie's arm, and like she tore out a chunk of his arm.
So he's missing a good chunk of muscle from like his elbow to like his mid arm that he won't
Yep.
ever get back. And I'm like,
Yep.
I'm reading that and I'm like, I can relate because I'm missing a chunk of my bone in my elbow to mid arm. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I can relate.
Yep. So Charlie ends up spending the next several weeks. I think he spends like in like a month or so in recovery.
Yeah.
His hair and his eye reverts back to their brown color, and the citizens begin to rebuild the city. Thing is that like I said, like I was getting into earlier, even though the gray has been stopped and the curse on the Galleon family has been lifted, things don't immediately go back to the way it was. Claudia, she's slowly getting her hearing back, but she won't 100% get her hearing back, and it's the same with Woody. Even though he does get his eyes back, he's still somewhat blind, and Leia has to live with her scarred lips, with her scarred mouth. And the people that were more severely affected by the gray, even though their bodies will recover from it, they will still permanently be scarred by it. So I'm like, you know what? Like when I was reading that, I'm like, wow, that's more realistic. Because if something like that were to happen in like the real world, it's not just going to go back to the way it was. There's still going to be scars. There's going to be, they're going to have to live with like long lasting effects of something like this disease. But
Yeah.
either way, Charlie and Radar go back to. They do make it back to the well. They go back up, and when he returns to his home, when he gets back to Sentry's Rest, which is his hometown, he learns that he had been gone way too long.
For 4 months or so.
For about 4 months, and it's February 2014. It was when he went back in. When he went down in the well, it was like early mid fall of 2013, and he had been declared reported missing while he was in Empis, and he reunites with his father. In the epilogue, Charlie does take his dad down into for one last trip into Empis to prove to him that the existence of Empis and that everything he told his dad was true. And believing him, his dad helps Charlie to permanently seal up the well so that way no one can ever go down in it again. Yep. And it does end like there's like a good like it does fast forward. I think about like 9 to 10 years into the future. Radar's old again. It's like okay, well he got an extra 9 years off of Radar, and he's like an English teacher now, and I believe he ended up selling the property. If not, he's still
no, I don't. I think his father's watching the property, and then because I think he's going to keep the property for like his retirement or whatever. But I think I think he kept it. but he's having
Yeah.
his dad watch it for the meantime.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Fairytale.
Yep.
Yep. It was this was like I said, this is definitely one of my personal favorites of
Yeah.
Stephen King,
Cool.
and definitely enjoyed it. Uh
I
it was one.
liked. Oh, sorry. Go on. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Nah, I mean, I like this book a lot too. I really enjoyed the Stephen King do something fantasy related. I mean, granted, I know
Mhm.
he's done the Dark Tower series, but I haven't read any of those. I only heard what happens in those. But this is pretty lit. And I love how he references, of course, the fairy tales. He mentions Brothers Grimm, Rumpelstiltskin. I mean, all of that.
Wizard of
He
Oz.
Wizard of Oz, because I mean, Empis is basically Wizard of Oz mixed with Lovecraft, and he mentions Lovecraft a lot throughout the book.
Mhm.
And I love that he makes a jab at R.L. Stein at one point. It's great because he's talking about. I think Charlie was talking about a childhood friend of his, a girl that he was into that got him into reading books, and there's someone mentioned R.L. Stein, and he's like, I don't want to read something fake scary. And I'm like, damn. Because I know there's that feud between R.L. Stein and King. So I was like,
Yeah. Damn.
but
Yeah, I liked it. He definitely took a different. Well, he's always had like a lot of King's stories do tend to like take like they do incorporate Lovecraftian style
yeah.
entities. Because like aside from like just some like more like psychological terrors, you got it from it you got Pennywise,
Yeah.
which is basically it. Pennywise is an outer creature, like
Yeah.
it came from not from outer space, but from like outside of the universe. And
Yeah.
then of course the Dark Tower and all these other and a lot of his other stories do tend to take a
I mean, he literally has a character that's literally a Lovecraftian entity. One of Lovecraft's creations without actually saying it's one of Lovecraft's creations. The Man in
which is
Black from
what.
the Man in Black from the Dark Tower series. That
Uh-huh.
is the Rolling Chaos, Nyarlathotep.
Oh, okay.
Hence why it's named the Man in Black. It's a reference to the Black Pharaoh, and so technically the Man in Black is one of Lovecraft's creations, but he doesn't outright say it. He just around causing chaos, making kids, having children left and right and shit. So there's a whole theory that
Yeah.
Carrie's one of his kids and all that shit. So yeah, I see King personally as a student of Lovecraft. Like Lovecraft was called himself a student of Edgar Allan Poe. So
Yeah.
I love that he references Lovecraft a lot. He takes like inspiration from him and shit. It makes my life a lot more fun reading his work and seeing the references. And I'm like, I know where that's from.
Yeah. But anyway, that was Stephen King's Fairy Tale. I do recommend it. It was good read. Just fair warning, it is long. It is pretty long. So, um, yeah, it's definitely one of those books that you get a lot. You do have spend a good chunk of time reading. Unless of course you're one of those speed readers who can read like like a big ass book like this one in like a day.
I know people who
Then
can.
good.
They're crazy, but it's a thing.
I mean, I've done it. I've read a book. I've read an entire book in a day, but I don't like doing that because like I like to enjoy a book and just take it in, you know. So, but that's just me.
Yep.
Uh, but anyway, I like to say thank you guys for finally tuning in to with us while we review Stephen King's Fairy Tale. I hope you like it. I hope you get go ahead and pick up a copy of your own if you haven't already done so. Definitely give it a read. And yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I hope you guys can join us next week.
As we talk
What should we-
about another book.
which
What
I
book
have
is that going to be?
Uh,
Uh,
well, shit, I don't know.
we'll
Honestly, I've been
figure.
waiting for this moment for months that I haven't thought what we're gonna do afterwards.
Well, cut this future part out, Devin. I think we have 2 more episodes to make to finish out the rest of the year. I know I want to do a
Uh,
Christmas one. I do have that one Christmas one called The Visitor.
uh-huh.
That one's a
Oh, you
relatively
want
short one. That one's for I can forefront that one. It's a little short. It's a Christmas one.
okay. Um, shit.
And that's
What's another book I have that I've read that we haven't done?
as far as me, I can let you borrow the ring. You can read the ring. We haven't done those books yet, and I've read the first one. We've done.
Hang on, let me look through my. Let me pull up my.
We can always do the lightning struck in heart.
Oh, the Lightning Struck Heart.
Yeah.
We could do that one, or we could also do Bear, Otter, and the Kid, which
Let's
is
do
another
Bear,
book.
Otter, and the Kid.
All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are gonna go ahead and do another book by T.J. Klune. It is another gay romance novel called Bear, Otter, and the Kid. And no, it does not involve uh, a burly, hairy man, a skinny, hairy man, and for some reason a cowboy. No, it's actually a very cute story about. It's very found family oriented. It's
Chosen
about a
family. We love that.
Yep. It is about a young man who is forced to raise his younger brother after their mother abandons them, and it's all about them coming together. Main character, whose name is Bear. Well, that's not his real name. It's actually a nickname given to him by his younger brother. Bear falls in love with his best friend's brother, and they come together. They build their own family. It's just all about it's sort of like a coming of age type story. Um, there's just a lot of trials and a lot of heavy shit, but eventually they come together and they form their own family. It's very honestly, it's very wholesome, and I'm pretty sure you guys will love it. So tune in next week. We'll go ahead and review first book of the Bear, Otter, and the Kid Chronicles, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. But until then, see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.